My name is Neil Hume. I am the mining and commodities editor at the Financial Times, and we've left the best till last today. We've got our discussion about commodity markets. And what we're going to discuss over the next 45 minutes is really about Africa and its tremendous endowment of mineral resources that it seems are going to be needed increasingly over the next 20 to 50 years, both in the wider world and in Africa. But I want to talk to my distinguished panelists here about how Africa can actually extract full value from the resources that lie under the ground. Now, to help me do that, from my far left, I have Simon Owodka from ArcelorMittal. He's in charge of their mining operations worldwide. Next to him, we have Isabel DOS Santos, the chairperson of Sonangol, the state oil company of Angola. Then we have Pierre Barbet from Vitol. He runs the whole of Africa for the country. And someone who needs no introduction because we've already heard from him before today is Moise KATUMBI, presidential candidate and former governor of Katanga. Isabel, perhaps I could come to you first. The theme of this conference is about making Africa work. Now, you were appointed chair of Sonangol by a presidential decree in 2016, having been a very successful sort of private businesswoman before. I wonder if you could just tell us a bit about the state of the company when you arrived and how, I mean, whether you think this company is actually functioning. Because, I mean, when you arrived, it was barely profitable, a lot of debt, struggling to invest, you know, been hit very hard by the downturn in oil prices. So, I mean, could you speak to us just a little bit about that and whether you think this company is now functioning and on the road to financial health again?
Well, thank you, Neil, and thanks for calling us the best for last, because when I first joined the oil sector, it was a challenging moment, not only for Sonangol, but all across the board. I mean, all the different IOCs were going through the same challenges that we were. We were facing downturn in revenue, so revenues had dropped dramatically. We were struggling with some of our investments, with some of the projects that we had developed. We felt that we were not generating enough dollars per barrel in terms of profits. So the challenges were not just Sonangol challenges. They were really challenges that were felt by other NOCs and IOCs. And the likes of Aramco took a program of transformation. Also, Abu Dhabi's national oil company also decided that they should embark on a program of transformation. And very much animated by that spirit, our government, our state, that is the 100% owner of Sonangol, also decided that it would be a good moment to transform and restructure the company. And the idea behind this is that we need to have a company that is more agile, more competitive, more profitable, and a country whose governance and whose corporate vision is more similar to the private sector. When I arrived, I found a very complex environment. We have a number of businesses that are not oil and gas related. There are other businesses. A company that had a great deal of debt. That debt was mainly connected to CapEx, to development of oil field projects that we had done in the past. And obviously, we were struggling because the oil prices were extremely low.
Okay, but I mean, just going forward then, to sustain Sonangol's production going forward, you're going to have to invest, presumably a great deal. Lots of the fields are deep offshore. I mean, how are you going to encourage international investors to come in and work with you in an environment where the oil price is barely above $50?
So the first review that we did, we've only been in this transformation program now for 18 months, so 1.5 years. So the first thing we did was to look at our financials. We looked at our numbers, and we quickly understood that the level of debt that we were carrying was just unsustainable. So we had a very aggressive debt reduction plan, and we reduced our debt in over 30% in this period. The second thing we did was to look for ways of reducing costs. And this reducing cost exercise, which we called Sona Light, is very much about engaging with our partners and also with our suppliers and renegotiating the contracts, rationalizing the spending, and seeing if we can get synergies. Through that program, we were able to capture about $1.2 billion of savings, of which we have already executed. So we have already consolidated 638 million. On top of that, we understood that cost savings was just not enough. We also had to look at ways of generating more revenue. So we started a program that we called SONA Plus, which is about looking at the different business opportunities we have across the board and how we can increase revenue generation throughout these businesses.
Okay, and just one final question before I move on to Moise. We've obviously had a succession in Angola. Succession's been a big theme of the conference today. I mean, I wonder if you, I mean, you're, what, 18 months into a 5-year program. I mean,
yes.
Have you received any sort of assurances that, you know, you will be around for the remainder of this term from the new president? I mean, we've been talking a lot about investment today and consistency and people being able to plan for the future. I mean, do you expect to see this program through?
We are a company, so we are an enterprise. We are not part of government. Our posts are not ministerial posts. We are not elected, and our nomination is not subject to the elections. So in that sense, we have a mandate, which is a directorship mandate, where we have to fulfill a business plan. There is a 5-year business plan model that has been put into place. Part of achieving those results in the business plan goes through culture change, so a management culture change. We're changing a lot of the ways people work in the company, so installing new culture, new values. We're looking at values like transparency, efficiency, increased profitability, recognizing merit, being a lot more rigorous and disciplined about your approach, and most of all, we're really looking through excellence. We're asking our people to do the extra mile, to give the extra mile to the company. In terms of transition, political transition in Angola, I think that Angola is an example. In terms of the political transition, we've had a president that was in office for a long time for historical reasons. Angola had been in war for almost 3 decades. This is the 3rd election we have in Angola. It's not the first. So Angola has been a full democracy for a while with a number of parties. There were several candidates, not only at this election, but also on the previous elections. And the MPLA won with the majority. So the same party as was previously running the government is continuing to run the government. And I believe that the policies and their vision are about continuity in terms of the economy in Angola's development. So I believe in that sense, nothing will change.
Nothing will change. Okay, thank you. Moise, we just come on to you. I mean, commodities, DRC, huge deposits of copper and cobalt, commodities that are going to be needed to power the green revolution. Yet we've got a country at the moment that's sitting on these resources is fantastically poor. I think there's only one big international mining company operating in the country now, which is Glencore. No one else seems to have the stomach to do it. The Chinese are in there as well. But yet, when you were in charge of Katanga, things were very different. I mean, I just wonder if you could tell me, when you were in charge of Katanga, how you made the mining industry sort of thrive. And also, I mean, if you were president again, well, not again rather, if you were president for the first time, I wonder what you would do to bring international mining companies back to the country. Does there need to be a wholesale change of the mining law in the Congo, or is it more a question of implementation? I mean, how would you see it?
Thank you very much. I think DRC really got a lot of resources, and DRC is very poor today because of the management, because there is no accountability. When I arrived as governor of Katanga, you can go on the internet to check the figures. The province, Katanga province, was producing less than 10,000 tons of copper cathode, from which President Mobutu and the Belgian left. That is a production per year. They left, I think, 400,000 tons of copper. So when I arrived, I supposed to manage, because people needed a change from 10,000 tons of copper cathode per year. What can I do? First, I supposed to see the situation on the ground. When I arrived, first I stopped the unprocessed material, which was going to China, to India, and different countries, because there was no value added. My first thing I did, I think it's the first week as governor, I went to the border. 500 trucks was going out, over 5,000 tons of export of unprocessed material, copper and cobalt, only 32 tons. One truck had no more paper for export. So I said, this is something good for me to stop the export on processed material. And I had meeting with the investors from 10,000 tons copper cathode per year. I went over 1.3 million tons production per year in Katanga. So if really there is stability, there is the new election, if really people want to come, I'm inviting everyone to come, and there is, you can produce more because there was no good plan on the energy side, because energy is about the national government. Today, Congo can produce up to 3 million tons of copper, and Congo can produce also, is the first producer of cobalt also. When I arrived, Congo was, I think, number 5. From 2,000 tons of cobalt per year, I went to over 70,000 tons. Coming to, for the companies, you know, you've got a very good mining code. When I stopped the export on unprocessed material, because I wanted to create job, to add the value for the things, and all those things are in the mining code. I think you're supposed to do only the follow-up to see what is good for the country, what also can give confidence to the investors. And the biggest problem was corruption also, because those trucks which are going 5,000 tons exporting every day, and only which was declared as 32 tons, is corruption. So I'm supposed to fight the corruption and to secure the investors, because there was a lot of harassment. Today, I think the expensive visa for the investors in the very expensive visa today in the world is the Congo visa. And to have that visa is a big problem. Even if you invest in the country, you have problem to have visa. So things must change. There is a lot of companies, Chinese companies, which are investing in the Congo. There is
that a good thing? I mean, is Chinese investment a good thing in the Congo?
I'm coming first for the Glencore company, which is one of the good, biggest investors also in the countries, and there is other small one. And there was also Freeport-McMoran.
But no more?
Yeah, when I arrived as governor, there was just one company producing.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a Jacamine. So after inviting everyone, giving them security, and the rule of law, because today there is no rule of law. That's why Freeport-McMoran just sold these things, and they are not anywhere in Congo. I think what is important if there is election, if I win election, because there can be election, you lose the election. If I win the election, I think what is important for me is to invite everyone to come and work with us. And there is a problem with companies which doesn't respect the mining code, which doesn't respect the pollution in the country, which doesn't respect the law of the companies. They can be Chinese, European, or African company. They are not going to have a place in my country. I think they must change. What is important is the future. I think there is a place for everyone. Rio Tinto and the others, they can come in the Congo to enjoy the new Congo.
But I talk to those companies at the moment, and I mentioned the Congo to Rio or BHP or one of the other big mining companies, and they're too scared, frankly, to go there. But you're saying to me the mining code's fine. So is the problem then with someone called Kabila, possibly? Is that the reason that there is this lack of international investment?
You see, the problem is one man because he doesn't want to leave the office. You know, money doesn't like noise. And if there is noise, harassment, and you have to be maybe a cousin of the president or a brother of the president to have business, you have I think, to make the difference between government and business. I think if Kabila goes, you are going to see investors are going to come, because no one today wants to go and invest in the Congo, which is sad for my country. If President Kabila left in 2016, it's supposed to be any stability. Isabel was talking about the change of power. I've seen it, I watched it myself, which I congratulate the President Dos Santos. It's the first time in Africa the president who's taking power the former president, is something new in Africa. So it's a big lesson for us African.
Okay. Simon, before I come to you, I just wanted to go to Pierre. You're head of Africa for Vitol. Now, for people who don't know, Vitol is the world's biggest independent oil trader. I mean, you handle more than 7 million barrels a day. But what I think probably people don't realize, you're actually producing oil now. You've got an E&P project in Ghana. Now, that's a very sort of un-Vitol thing to do, to risk something in a risky exploration project. I just wonder if you could tell the audience really how a company like Vitol got comfortable with the risk of, investing a lot of money in a big upstream exploration project in a country like Ghana. What things had to be in place for you to go ahead and do that?
Well, I think we acquired the block in Ghana in 2008. That was when, trading was doing very well. There was a lot of, I think, comfort in the company that we could do things in the E&P, exploration production. Yeah, we did this, we bought this block, and we were lucky. We struck oil, we took E&I in, we farmed in, and then, we had first oil last summer, last August, basically.
Yeah.
Actually, in advance. So it's not in a trader's gene to go and immobilize capital for the next 10 years. That's true. But it happened that, it was done, and I don't think it's not a company's policy today to go in E&P specifically. But this one was done, and it was a success. I think we're happy with that.
But it was only a success in as much as you wouldn't have gone in and done this project without the World Bank and the IFC getting involved in this, because presumably lenders would not have come in otherwise to sort of bankroll this project.
I think that the characteristic of this project, it's an oil project and it's a gas project. It's not associated gas, it's a different gas field, which is beneath the oil field. So when you discover gas, as many countries know today in Africa, you can do several things. You can burn it, like we used to do it. A lot of majors used to do it in many countries, especially associated gas. You can use it domestically with the right logistics for power plants. You can liquefy it and export it as an LNG. This is roughly what you do with gas today. When we found gas, I think the political power in Ghana at that time decided that it was a good idea that this gas could be used for the domestic use, and exclusively for the domestic use, without going into expensive, capex-intensive LNG projects, which are billions of dollars expenses. So they decided that this gas would be consummated on the domestic market. But for us, as producer of the gas on E&I, the question was then what kind of guarantee we would get from this gas sales. Hence the World Bank. And the World Bank came in, and we negotiated with them, with the World Bank, IFC, and the MIGA, the insurance arm. And it's about an $8 billion project. And the World Bank came in for about $700 million guarantee package. And I think it was the biggest single guarantee package that they put together for a single project. And it took us 2 years to negotiate, but we had a very strong support from the Ghanaian government. We had E&I, Vitol, and very competent World Bank personnel. So it was a big success story in the end, and we're happy to have gone through the end.
And the gas that you've discovered, is there the infrastructure within Ghana to take that ashore, to put it into power stations to create power, or is that still the missing piece of the puzzle?
There are bits and pieces to be built, a bit more than bits and pieces. There are some plants to be built. There are some power plants to be plugged in. There's fortunately an existing pipeline which is offshore, which is working the other way today, and will be reversed. So there's a lot of things that needs to be aligned before this gas can actually be produced and consumed, and therefore paid. But it's going well, and I think first gas is next year. Next year,
okay. Simon, if I could come to you now. As I mentioned earlier, you run Mittal's mining operations around the world, and this goes from Canada to Africa, to lots of other destinations as well. I just wonder if you could just talk to us about when you're choosing to make an investment, what is the most important thing, and how does Africa stack up against, say, a Canada or a Kazakhstan or any of the other places that you mine iron ore or coal, for example?
Sure, sure. We have about 18 mines across 8 countries. Our main shareholder is very entrepreneurial, and borders don't worry them. Any country risk really is not the issue. So you've got to come back to the basics, which is what is the resource I'm looking at. For us, as the world's largest steel company, it's iron ore and coal and materials that can feed to blast furnaces. So in the language of mining, we talk about tier of assets. Tier 1 assets are very big, competent, low cost, long life assets. Tier 2, tier 3, etc. And so we look at that. We look at also the logistics around that. We look at workforce. The government's attitude is very critical. So when we look at Liberia, I mean, we've had quite a bumpy ride, to be honest. And when you look back at first entry, the company was one of the first companies back in after the Civil War cessation, and 2005. It took about 2 years to actually negotiate the MDA, the Mineral Development Agreement. Got going, stopped, got going, prices like this. 2011, we finally got operations going a number of years late with a low-grade product, a direct shipping ore. And so I'd call this a tier 2 asset, maybe tier 3. It's not the world's best, so you have to work really hard. You have to work much harder. The good thing going for the Liberian asset is it has a mine, a rail, and a port. And in mining world, dry bulks, that's the critical elements for success. If you've got those 3 under your control, and in our joint venture, 85% ArcelorMittal, 15% Liberian government, that is a critical element for success, and that weighs off some of the aspects of, at that time, lower grade, etc. Of course, we got hit by Ebola in 2014. It decimated our expansion plan. We're in the process of a $1.7 billion expansion. We have, to date, invested $1.7 billion. That expansion program got shelved. So a very checkered history, and we are now developing a new mine this quarter to get us through back up to about 5 million tonnes a year production. So are we thrown off balance by this? No. I think it's just part of our DNA is we accept the challenge. And when you look at where it is today, I mean, there's a big election tomorrow in Liberia.
Yep.
And the government has been very pro-business. We obviously act under the same transparency, the same safety, the same standards of productivity. We have an objective for Liberia to be the same cost as our competitors in the Pilbara in Australia for iron ore. So we expect this asset to operate just like any other asset around the world. Is it challenging? Yes.
What's the biggest challenge? Is it workforce? Is it power? Or?
I think, yeah, I mean, personally, I think the CLSG, the 4-country grid coming in, is going to be one of the biggest impetus factors for Liberia. It's a small country, large land mass in terms of small population. And, you know, we generate all our own power, heavy fuel oil methodology. And with power coming in from Côte d'Ivoire and hooking up the 4 countries, including Liberia, I personally think that's going to be, you know, build the roads and they will come scenario for Liberia. The other point, I think, is workforce. We employ 1,000 people today. We have about 700 contractors on top of that for security, etc. You know, it's not a country which has a very developed workforce in terms of education. So what we've had to do is you do it yourself. We're just finishing the investment of a $7 million VTC, a vocational training centre, up in Tokode, which is up at the mine site near the Ghanaian border. And that will be our own program. We'll have a 3-year certificate. We've spoken to the government. We've said, let's align and make that the country's certification process for education. And so I think that is, you have to do it yourself. The power, we had to do it ourselves. We've had to relocate the farmers ourselves. We've had to build 4 schools ourselves. We've built 2 hospitals, 2 clinics. We probably treat 20,000 people a year. It's part of being in that region when there's no ground base, no strong foundation. Is it impossible? No. It just means we have to really, as I say, pedal harder to keep our costs down, keep our competitiveness up to where we need to get this product on the water and have a long-term resource that's viable.
Okay, thank you. for that. If we could just change tack and just go back to oil for a moment. And just one for Isabel and Pierre, really. I mean, it did strike me listening to Mr. Dangote earlier that in Africa as a whole, there is a bit of an issue. There's lots of countries that produce lots of oil, yet many of them seem to be net importers of oil products like gasoline and diesel. Angola, for example, is the second biggest oil producer in Africa, 1.7 million barrels a day, yet it's a net importer of fuel. Now, I just wonder, Isabel, how you can grapple with that challenge. I mean, you've got one refinery in the country. You did have plans to invest in another one, which I think were put on hold. I mean, do you have plans to revive that refinery investment, to cut down the imports you're making? And I just wonder how Pierre sees the lack of refining across Africa as a whole and what some of the drivers are for it. So perhaps you could just tell us, I mean, what Sonangol's plans are for refining in the country.
When we look across the board, across the whole of Africa, there is a deficit of refined products. Our refining capacity in the continent is below our needs. I would say it's probably about a third for what we really need. And most of our refineries are also old, and the technology that they're using make them no longer competitive. Now, I believe there is a case for refineries on the continent. I believe there's a case to build refineries in Africa. But when we do so, and when we think and design such refineries, we must do it in a very competitive model. Now, traditional refineries that are based here in Europe have very low margins, so they're quite cheap to run. And if we compare with the large investments of large refineries that are currently being done in the Middle East, those are also very, very difficult competition. So when we think about designing, planning, and building our refineries in Angola, we really have to have a very strong business case. And this is what we did. We went back to look at our Lobito project. That is an old project that has been on our desk for the last 15 years, and really to understand if the assumptions still are valid and what would be the improvements to make sure that the business case we had was a good business case. And this is what we're doing now. We're currently reviewing the business model case for refining. So we are interested in building a refinery, yes. We will be looking at capturing investment for that refinery. We'll be looking at partners that would come in and do that with ourselves. And most of all, what's really important is that we have a solid and robust business model.
So, I mean, who do you think the partner might be? Would you be looking towards China for the investment in something like that?
I've seen that there is a great level of interest from all kinds of whether operators or traders or even just financiers to take a role in the refining production in Africa. Quite simply because when you look at the prospects of African consumption, the prospects are good. So Africa will be one of those continents where the consumption for refined goods will still be on the rise compared to Europe, where slowly the consumption is going to slow down, and also Asia, that also is expected that the consumption will slow down. So Africa will still be a good destination for refined products.
Yeah, because the country's fuel bill must be quite high, and I guess for people like Vitol, that's quite good, because it's a sort of a money-making opportunity to bring products in from refineries in Europe into Africa. But I mean, would Vitol ever consider a refinery investment in Africa, or?
We have refineries already in Europe,
yep,
and also in Australia. So yeah, of course, why not Africa? It's something we look at definitely. Trading today is all about assets. It's not about pure trading anymore. So yes, we look at that in the same way we looked at all the downstream investments. But as Isabel said, you need to look at the merit of the business case first, because you need a lot of factors to come in. And as she mentioned as well, it's you don't want to build a small refinery or a very simple refinery. It doesn't make any sense today, because you have to compete with the big monsters from the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, soon Kuwait, UAE. And all these refineries are big refineries producing very cheap products, and they can kill your market if you are not building the right plants.
I mean, do you think a big refinery in Africa then can compete with some of these monsters in the Middle East and increasingly India as well?
I think definitely a refinery in the West, or a refinery or two in the West, would definitely make sense. Like Aliko this morning mentioned it very clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you look at the demography of Africa, which was also mentioned this morning, yes, obviously, this is a continent which is going to need more and more products. Right? So yes, it needs refineries. So whether it's in Nigeria, Angola, or elsewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moise, if I just could come back to you and just discuss just a topic about why the mining industry isn't really firing in the Congo. And it occurs to me that a lot of the problems are probably around Gécamine, which is the state mining company. You know, there's countless stories about corruption and things like that. I mean, if you were president, would you get rid of Gécamine, or do you think Gécamine can work? Could it be a force for actually, you know, generating more value for the country from its mineral resources?
I think what is important first is to restructure Gécamine and to try and privatize Gécamine, because Gécamine have still a lot of mines, and the Gécamine today is not profitable. Why? Because they are producing their copper or cobalt in all the factory which the Belgian left. I think the factory is in Likasi. I think this factory was been built, I think, in 1930 or something like that. So the price of the copper today, I think it's 6,000 per ton, and they are producing at $9,000 per ton. So they are losing money every day. So if there was good management and good planning, they're supposed to close already this factory, because they are losing almost 6% of the income. For me, I think it's better to make the difference, to give all these mining sectors to the private companies. So at least there are not going to be any involvement of the government. I think what is important is first in Gécamine to see what Gécamine is doing today, and the key issue is corruption, and really to give time to the other people. Even the management of Gécamine, they are very qualified. You can give them also that company to buy out, because today who's suffering is the people of Gécamine. They are maybe 18 months not yet been paid. So somebody who's working with not get paid is a big problem. I think you have to have a courage to say enough is enough. Let's check the company. Let's maybe call some investors with the private management to run the company, and the state to go out, because the state of Congo is a big failure on all the things which they are doing. And all these depend with just something to have election to change all this picture.
Okay, if you privatized Gécamine, I just wonder actually if the best way that the DRC can extract value from its resources is not actually building big mines, investing lots of money in projects. It's actually providing the sort of the picks and shovels to the international mining companies that are working there, the support services. I mean, do you think that is the best way to do it, rather than having a local company that does invest in these big projects?
You know, when I grown up in my province, there was no artisanal miners. Today, if you can check, if you can maybe see what they are doing in artisanal mining, you find children, women in the mine, which is really ridiculous. I think we need to help these artisanal miners to give them also some new plants, some new concentrator, which they can partner with some companies, because today who's stealing from the artisanal miners is the people who are there buying. If, let's say, the copper content is 26%, the guy come, he never been to school one day. When he's selling his copper, 26% of copper, one guy from China, India, or anywhere in the world, he say it's 2%, and the guy, what he's going to get inside there is better to have concentrator. I think it's better to mechanize, to make semi-mechanized. And for me, I think it's better to bring big companies where the small mining scale mine can sell their concentrate directly to those big miners.
Okay, and Simon, just coming to you on the same question, really. How does Liberia best monetize its its iron ore, for example? Is it providing services around it, do you think, or having a share of your project, for example? I mean, how?
Yeah, there's been a number of people playing in the area. So Ebola, 2014, and a price crash afterwards cleaned out. There's nobody left. We're the only ones that stayed all through Ebola, continued to produce, and all the other producers or would-be producers have exited the country. So it's an interesting sort of scenario, because some of those deposits were to be renovated, so they were old deposits up in Bong County. Others were greenfield. But when you get down to it at the end of the day, not every piece of dirt in the world can be developed. I mean, it's about return on investment, and that's why I think it's right, the comment about DRC is that if there's a business case that holds up, if there's a financial return for shareholders, that creates the impetus for growth or access. So I think the Liberian government has tried very hard to encourage people to come, and has been unfortunately knocked around by volatility and price in those basic raw materials like iron ore. We'd already spent the money up front. We'd already got going. We already had cash flow, and we haven't made a lot of money to date, but we've at least weathered those storms. So again, I go back to the quality of the resources. BHP and other companies were in country. They did the exploration. They've since exited. Too small, too low grade. So I think you have to be honest and say some dirt will never be developed because it's too low grade. Others have size and purpose. We have 2 billion tonnes, luckily, on our resource levels, and so we have a long future with further processing on site. The government, as I said earlier, they're very pro us. We work very closely with the Mines Department, Labour Department. We have a good relationship. They understand what we need, and we've been a contributor to what we believe is the community in terms of schools, as I say, education, training, farmer relocations. I mean, they expect us to do as much in return as we would expect them to do to encourage our existence in the country. And they have, in terms of tough times. We've seen deferral of some payments to the government, which has helped us out with smoothing out those tough periods. So you have to have that partnership. And I say earlier, again, when you don't have tier 1 assets and you're dealing with tier 2s or tier 3s, we all have to work together harder to get these things to stay alive.
Okay. Isabel, can I just come back to you? We heard a very frank admission from the Nigerian Vice President this morning. I think he said, we don't have all the time in the world to work out what to do with our oil. And I think that was a sort of a reference to the green energy revolution, electric vehicles. And when I look at Sonangol and indeed Angola, most of your oil is going into China now. The Chinese obviously have a lot of ambitions in the renewable space, electric vehicles. I mean, do you share the concerns of the Nigerian Vice President that you will need to get your oil? You're not going to have the luxury of leaving that oil in the ground for 30 or 40 years now. I mean, we're really looking at a window of 10 years, a decade, to get that oil out and into markets before it becomes, I mean, perhaps it's too strong to say a stranded asset, but I mean, is that a key risk for you? And perhaps, Pierre, if I could get a view from you about when you see oil demand peaking, for example, are you in the 2025 camp, or does Vitol see it possibly a bit later?
Our perspective for growth and future development and investment are geared around gas. We believe that we still have untapped gas. We have 7 gas prospects that we have identified and that we aim to develop. And we believe that the growth of gas consumption will be faster than the oil growth.
So in the same way that Shell has moved its portfolio away from oil more towards gas, that's the way you would see Sonangol going in this sort of green revolution world?
Gas would be part of our strategy to diversify. So we would still very much stay committed to oil because we have great oil prospects. We still have untapped resources that we have, reserves that we have identified and which we know that are viable. So we have projects that can come on board at a profitable manner, and that's the key message, is that we have oil reserves that could come on board at a lower break-even price point per barrel than the ones that we're currently developing. And we feel that these should be developed and these do have good possibilities. In terms of oil, I think that the uses of oil will also diversify, because we have to think that the petrochemical industry is also growing, and consumption of petrochemical goods are also growing. So I don't think there is such an urgent case for abandoning oil or believing that oil should be completely extracted. I would take a longer-term view than the one you've put forward.
When would you see demand peaking then? 2030 on that longer sort of term view? Is that Sonangol's planning assessment, or?
We believe the demand for gas will peak around 2030, yes.
Okay. Sorry, oil you mean. Pierre, how do you see it at Vitol as the world's biggest oil trader? You must have lots of analysts sort of poring over the numbers, crunching this stuff.
Yeah, I'm certainly not going to tell you that the end of oil is near. I don't think so. I think we need oil for the next few dozen years to come, just as a base load. And as Isabel said, I mean, this is we need oil for something else anyway. And once again, renewable or electric are intermittent energies. They are not there all the time. Yes, you need oil as a complement, or you need all energies together. Right? Not only oil, but oil, solar, wind, everything needs to be put together to satisfy the growing world population. Right? So I don't see. We made lots of assumptions on peak oil production. Now we are talking about peak oil demand. Now we're talking about can we see prices up again? We always got it wrong in terms of forecasts on oil prices, on oil production, on oil demand. I think there's nothing changed. We just don't know today, but we just know that world consumption is still increasing, and that the world oil fields are depleting by natural depletion rates. Let's not forget that, to the tune of between 2 to 5% per year. So this needs to be replaced today for the next dozen years to come.
If I also can add to the mobility that you mentioned, electric vehicles. It's true that a lot has been done in electric vehicles. Most of those electric vehicles are for individual consumption. The question is about freight, because still, when you need to move larger tonnage, when you have bigger masses to move, today do it with electrical mobility is still not resolved.
Moise, electric vehicles, I mean, a huge opportunity for the Congo with the copper and cobalt resources. How does it make the most of it?
It's a huge opportunity. Now we depend with the vision of the leader, because you see, today is cobalt, and Congo export almost 60% of the old cobalt. The biggest problem is that money going back to the people of the Congo, because if with that opportunity we need to diversify our economy, and to have really a real government which can show to the entire world Congo is rich, because today Congo is very poor, and I never want to talk about the potential of the Congo, because if those potential are not be developed, so there is no potential, there is zero. And the only small money which Congo is making, if it can go to a group of some bandits in their pocket, really there is no future for that Congo. That's why I'm inviting all the business community to come and have this opportunity after election to come and invest in the new Congo, because when Congo is going to be strong, I think all Central Africa is going to be strong, and we are going to resolve a lot of problems in Central Africa and in Africa. I think what is important for us also is energy, because you can't produce if there is no energy. You've got the Inga, which I call a monsters. We talk about Inga since I was born. I think there is another hydropower. Angola built a lot of hydropower. Even in Rwanda, they built some hydropower. In Congo, you can move forward. With no energy, you can't develop the mining sectors. I think there is a lot of investors who want to come and invest in the
So you should dam the river then to create some hydro?
No, there is a lot of rivers for hydro, which there is even feasibility study. Inga is supposed to produce over 45,000 megawatts. Today, Inga is producing less than 2,000 megawatts. I think after President Kabila 16 years to be in a president, is supposed at least to reach even at 18,000 megawatt with Inga. I think what is important for me is to bring all the investors in agriculture, to help us build the hydropower. There is a lot of sites we can build up maybe to 60,000 megawatt in Congo if you have serious investors, if there is stability, if there is all the good condition for them to come and invest.
Okay, well, we've just run over time. I think we've probably got a moment for one question, please. If you could just raise your hand and just state where you're from. I think we've got a gentleman at the front.
Hello, thank you for the panel. My name is Alain Siona Defis from Pictet Asset Management. I have a quick question for Mrs. Isabel dos Santos. When we look at Sonangol and we look at some of the peers in emerging markets like Gazprom, Petrobras, Gazmunaygas, they're active in the capital markets, international capital markets. Would that be the next avenue, whether it's debt or a little bit of equity, liberating a bit of capital for Sonangol?
So we are an NOC, a national oil company. So we're the concessionaire. But within our group, we do have an IOC-like company, which is Sonangol PNP, which is an operator. So we're very active in Angola. We have some international operations in Brazil, in Iraq, for example. And we're looking at other international operators. So it is part of our ambition to enlarge our footprint and to be more like our peers that you've mentioned.
So that could mean a stock market listing, a privatization for that part of Sonangol then, or?
For Sonangol, as we said, we are an NOC.
No, but for the production part of the business rather than...
I think in terms of the production part of the business, we're looking at different ways of funding. Currently, the model we use is partnership, so we partner up with other IOCs. Sometimes we take an active role as an operator, and sometimes we take just a role as a financial investor. It's a strong model. It works well. We're increasing our company's efficiency, which is key. We need to have a company that is attractive. And we're doing that by bringing in more talent and also by looking at our processes, so having better processes, and restructuring the company itself.
Okay, well, sadly, we've run over time, but if I could just thank all of my panelists, Simon, Isabel, Pierre, and Moise, if you could give them a hand. Thank you very much.